And we are live in three. Oh, we're live. That
We're
was quick.
live.
Usually I have to count us in three, two, one, but today was immediate. Welcome to another episode of the Shift and Co. with Stefan and Laura. Laura, how are you doing today?
I'm fabulous as always. We actually have some sunshine here on the East
Lovely.
Coast. It's been quite rainy and cloudy. So,
Well, it
good
looks like you
morning.
sent that weather our way because it is very rainy and cloudy here in Cape Town
Oh,
today.
yeah. This has not
Not
been a
that we're
great summer so far.
Oh, lovely. We're having a very wet winter on this side of the world, but blessings. We love it because, of course, helps the plants grow, which feeds the
Yes.
animals, which gives us all food and lovely things. So that's great.
Yes,
Very
absolutely.
excited for today's topic: how to bring higher spiritual consciousness into your experience without dogma.
Mm,
Now, this can be sometimes a little bit of a touchy subject. I think, especially because the way the world has started moving over the last couple of years with how connected we are getting, we're starting to be exposed to very different ways of expressing spirituality,
right.
right? And I constantly look around and I'm like, gosh, it's interesting how hidebound people can get in their expression of their spirituality, right? I have to live my life in this way, this way, this way in order to gain favor. And it's so interesting when you and I were talking about this, we were saying that in truth, and this is borne out in every single spiritual text on the planet, the path of higher spiritual consciousness is really meant to supplement and support your life as a human and to
Right.
support this human experience, not overtake it. And that can sometimes be something that we lose sight of because I was reading a book recently, and then I'd love to get your take on my opinion on this as well.
Yeah.
But I was reading a book recently called The Autobiography of a Yogi, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. It was Steve Jobs' favorite book, in fact, the only book he ever read. And I was reading this book written by this highly spiritual person, actually, and I was immediately taken with the fact that he came from a wealthy family, was not afraid to use the wealth that he had access to in order to further the message that he was able to impart. But equally, his spirituality led him to an ability to appreciate what he had so much more deeply
Yeah.
because he could see it as what it was, which is a gift from the divine, right? So he'd be
Yeah.
like the wealth that he had access to because of his family, he saw it as a blessing that was bestowed to be used for a higher gift. And in so doing, he would look at people who were materialistic, right, who were going, you have to get a job as a banker or a manager or whatever the case may be. And he's going, that narrow minded approach to the material world led them to not appreciate or have gratitude for everything that they earned. And I just thought that's really, really interesting.
And I think for so many of us, the word spirit, spirituality, consciousness, soul elevation, all of these words that go around the experience of connecting to self in a beautiful way, thus connecting with divine, I think it's getting a bit muddled with a lot
Mm,
of what's happening. The human condition, for me, has become quite distorted. I'm not saying that in a negative or a positive way. It's very static for me right now. It's staticky. It's not smooth. Um, it's almost like if I started to try to play, Bach on the piano right now, it would be not pleasant. Though my attempt for the tone and the beauty is in my heart, but the actual mm, experience of it would just not be,
mm,
smooth and beautiful to the ear. And this is what I'm personally finding. And I do think it's because what's seated and rooted in the psyche and actually how the world is shifting, we're in between that space. It's almost like we're on an unsteady bridge. Say rather than like the metaphor, rather than the bridge maybe being all, heavy pylons and cement and just steel, it feels more like those small swaying bridges that you see in the jungle, right? Just
Right.
like rope and maybe a little cable. And when you walk on it and the wind comes, I kind of been feeling a little bit of that metaphor. And I think we really don't quite understand, like the yogi, that wealth of expansion of wealth of self and spiritual connection, right? And spiritual connection of self, how these both reflect why we're here. And that is
Mm,
truly to evolve, and using money, using knowledge, and I mean using in the most powerful and
right.
positive ways, using insight and wisdom and almost a gained observance. Those are all um, aspects of the human condition that he tapped into beautifully, and was able to look at them not as even a contrasting modality, but an expansion modality, an advancing
Hmm.
modality. And I think that's why he was so successful. Same thing maybe we'll use with Steve Jobs. The reading, I think, wired something into his consciousness where he realized there's not a lot of limitations here. It's the limitations that we place within
Right.
our own thought process, then the emotions that we attach to it, right? We all know this. And then we behave a certain way. And then the habit, where he chose very early on to look at everything as a tool of advancement, a vehicle of forward movement. And from what you've shared with me and what I know about this particular yogi, he was able to just take everything in and not let it limit him, but fully engage in it. So I think that's something I know that you and I talk about. We work at this in our own lives, is when we see something, do not let it be a limiting energetic construct. Let it be something that advances us out and open. So he saw the divine in everything, which is why he lived in that framework of energy.
That is so true because, it's so easy for us to see contrasts
Mhm.
as negative.
Yes.
And it's so easy for us to sit back and go, oh, there's an obstacle in my way. It's This is it. This is the end of the road. When instead, when you have, like you said, that expansion consciousness as opposed to the polarity consciousness,
Yeah.
you start to see. And actually, I used to give this as like blessings and wishes to my friends whenever they've had a monument. What's what I'm looking for? A milestone in their life that they've
Mhm.
reached. And I would always say, may your mountains become molehills. May your obstacles become stepping stones.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Because it's so true in my own life. When I see an obstacle, I go, okay, is this trying to tell me to redirect? Because if there's something I really wanted and there's this huge obstacle that seems insurmountable, is it telling me to redirect? Is it telling me to try and find a better way to overcome that obstacle so that it does become a stepping stone? Or, and we were talking about this in preparation for today, or is it a case of the universe saying the timing is not quite right? There's a lesson you need to learn so that you can evolve to the level where you can accept in this manifestation that you're trying to create.
And that's
Right.
a really great point, and I think this is in just in my life's observation, when we are thinking we're prepared, we're primed, we're ready for something, but we really haven't applied the effort for it to be in proper alignment, and it comes in too fast because it's more
Hmm.
based, let's say, from ego. I want, I expect. And again, this is not negative or positive. It's just a little bit of that hurriedness.
Yes.
And things come in and they go awry. It's usually, the pattern repeats itself because that lesson was not truly learned nor valued. Now, I think when we look at something that we're desiring or we want to manifest and attract, if we step back and we really learn that the process and the unfolding of it, there's a beauty and there's an enrichment to it, and we almost calm the energy down. And then when it comes in, I almost think this is almost divinity at work in that way. There's a trust, there's a gratitude for it when you
Mm,
look at it differently. And the lessons that we need to learn are so important, I think, for our well being and the collective betterment of the global family, that when we try to sidestep it, that's, I think, why we have some distortion happening. Rather than maybe take a page from the yogi and look at everything as a divine, hmm, a divine manifestation from something that maybe we all can't tap into, but maybe if we trusted it, it would be a different experience for it. So again, that would help remove some of the judgment. It would, some of the opinions we place on one another. It would just calm it down so we could look that everything is expressing itself
yeah.
and there's a contrast to it. And how can we take all of this and use it for the collective betterment, as I said, rather than personal? And I think that's a little bit what's happening now. We're losing some of that, where maybe some of what he learned in this life is such a beautiful example to follow, that there are messages and they are divine. And that doesn't mean for people, let's say, that don't believe in God or universal force or have a very linear way of looking at things or very binary. So just open up, just advance that position and continue to advance, open it, right? I always think of, and I've said this before on the podcast, I think of that we were watching one of the races, the horse races, and the blinders, and how they are
Right.
not allowed to put any thought outside of that goal. And what would happen if you took the blinders off those horses in a race? They probably would crash into each other
Yes.
because they're so trained to just stay in that lane. And I think, again, this is the beauty of, and I'll reference the book. It's not that he moved out of the lane, but he certainly expanded all lanes. And he did that through the eyes of divinity. And so I think that there's something there.
It's so interesting you should put it like that, though, in terms of expanding all lanes, because I feel as though, and okay, on a purely personal, very human level, I'm not the biggest fan of Apple as a product company, right? But I have huge respect for Steve Jobs in terms of what he did. And I always say, when people ask, how do rich people become rich? And I say it's a very simple formula. It comes down to how many people's lives you impact.
Right,
The more lives you're able to impact, the greater your wealth becomes.
right.
And it's interesting that in his development of his own spirituality, and I'm not sure, so please, to our audience, do not come for me on this. I haven't checked if he what his belief system was. I think he was initially agnostic and then became more spiritual. I don't think he subscribed to religion or anything like that.
Right.
But it's so interesting that spirituality for him really did express itself in his creative genius in the
Right.
physical. And I bring that up because there's different paths for different people in terms of reaching their spiritual goal. And that's brought out in that book as well, where he says, some people need to go up into the Himalayas to sit in a cave for 20 years and attain their spiritual union that way. And he says his pride said that that's where he needed to be, only to find his guru in a busy market square in the middle of a massive city, just standing there calmly waiting for him, going, it's been 3 years that I've been waiting for you, and here you finally are,
Yeah.
right? And he still thought, I have to go to the Himalayas. And his master's going, why would you need to go there when what you're looking for is right here in front of you?
Yeah.
I bring that up because there are so many different paths, and I've seen friends of mine who have gone down a very, what I would term a very deeply spiritual path, where they renounce worldly possessions, they really give their lives to their religion or their beliefs or whatever the case may be. And for the longest time, I thought that that was what I had to do
Yeah.
in order to, again, achieve that union that I'm looking for with the divine. It was so interesting for me then to figure out that no, my path is very different. My path is very much needing to be one where I'm able to live in this world and not only experience but recognize the divinity in all things and
Yeah.
all experiences,
Yeah.
right?
And I would almost feel I did the same thing. You and I've talked about this. I smile right now because the thought of it at this point in my life. But when I was young, we grew up right next door to a very world famous abbey, and I played in the fields around there. I
Mm,
was very connected when I came in young to religion, and now I look back, of course, and I'm like, no, I can see why that didn't happen for that exact reason. Being in this physicality and learning that you can use thought to create your world and the world around you is so powerful and empowering and such a beautiful gift, I think, not only to bestow upon yourself, but to one another. And it is true that I think we grew up in a time where it did seem in order to tap into the divine, you must be very isolated from the rest of the world and almost chosen, right, to sit in the church or sit in the temple or sit atop that mountain with those beautiful humans that ate rice and water and had butterflies land on their shoulders. And it's really true. I've talked to so many people about this
hmm.
still to this day.
Yeah,
There are yogis amongst us in three-piece suits, possibly,
yeah,
creating a piece of artwork or music, building a new piece of technology. That is divinity expressing itself. This is why it's important to say divinity doesn't mean religion and it doesn't not mean religion. It just
exactly.
means what it means for you. Tapping in, tuning into that most highest energetic vibration frequency in your mind, in your body, in your soul, in your spirit, within your personality, and tapping into full human potential. For me, that is divinity. That is
Absolutely.
humanness expressing its highest self.
For sure. And this is where it really starts to get interesting because we do, whether you want to say fortunately or unfortunately, we live in a polarized universe.
Yeah,
Polarity exists in everything, right? But actually, I shouldn't say but. However, we also then tend to take that polarity and put it onto things that actually do not have polarity,
right.
right? So, for instance, one of the things that I always use as an example, a hurricane is neither good nor bad. It just is, right?
Right.
It's a force of nature that exists. It causes intense damage wherever it lands, wherever it strikes landfall, but that damage leads to new growth.
Right.
And it's part of the ecosystem. It does something good even when it's doing something
Yeah.
bad, right? It just is. I bring that up because, especially in the West, where we live in a very materialistic and sexually driven world, right? We then put polarity on those two things,
Yeah.
where material goods and sex are neither good nor bad, they just are.
Right.
It's the perception that we attach to it
Yes.
that creates a negative or a positive polarity. So
Mm.
coming back to materialism, one of the scriptures that is almost always misquoted, which grinds my gears like you can't believe, is where it says the love of money is the root of all evil,
Right. Right.
which is how the scripture actually reads. What most people say instead is money is the root of all evil.
Right.
And it's so interesting that people would then say that and be like, okay, well, wealth is evil. We should not be wealthy. When in actual fact, what the spiritual teachings are trying to show us and teach us is wealth is something that just is.
Right.
If you're materialistic, if you love money, that's a different thing because now you're using the focus on material things as opposed to focusing on bettering yourself and
Right.
evolving yourself.
Well, that goes
And
back right to the Mandela effect, how a whole society has heard that, right? That money is evil.
mhm,
Oh my, without money at the moment, because that is what is in our construct, we could not function in our world.
no,
That's just the play out of it right now. And as you said, the energy you place to it, which is back to what you were saying, wealth attracts wealth. People are always like, how do the wealthy keep getting wealthy? Or and the poor stay poor. Well, that is a framework of
mhm,
energy that we've placed out to one another. Well, if you're poor, your struggle up is, whoo, watch out. Very few people make that. If you were born into money, whoa, you're lucky, smooth sailing. But we know both sides to that story where that is absolutely false. Absolutely false. And again, this comes into the power, right, of thought. And not saying you can think your way into being wealthy, but yes, you can.
yes, you can.
Yes, you
Yes,
can.
you can.
It's just our
There's a whole
brain,
book on that.
right, and our personality thinks, "No, I can't." And that's the obstacles, and that's the dogma, and that's where that all comes in. And yes, maybe if you're born into great health and some financial freedom, and you choose to use that vehicle for the greater good, now you can accomplish great things. There are many
Absolutely.
people that have come into great wealth that have done very negative things in the world, leadership, politicians, certainly religious leaders, right? And so it shows it's not the money. It's not the thought. It's not the application or the execution of creation. It's the person and what they're placing into the field at the
Yep.
moment that creates the causation, negative or positive, for all of us to experience. So I think, tapping into divinity, tapping into materialism is one and the same because I choose to look at it from that perspective. Now, I would not look at someone that was downtrodden and say, just sit there and
Of course.
meditate in the middle of, you know, abject poverty and bullets whizzing by your head and just and you can levitate yourself out of there. Of course not. This is to say that you have the potential of the power that creates worlds. And if you don't understand that, I always say, please suspend that and know you have the most intense, empowered computer sitting right here every day. You can take in thought through a book, through a podcast, through a yogi, through any means you want to. It could be a great CEO. There's just so much beautiful leadership out there. Look at them, watch them, find the divine in them because it is in there. And look at something that resonates or aligns with you. And I could say a few people right now that I've just saw some post on LinkedIn that really put forth some very unique information, and it could be taken through that lens of divinity. And it was about wealth and about creation and about bringing people together and doing something different to stop looking at it the way it's always been. So if we look
Right.
at money is evil and you hold that vibration through thought, it's going to resonate in your personality. It's going to resonate in your choices. It's going to resonate in how you interact with the world. And therefore, you will always look at it. So you will hold it in that framework. If you begin to think, No, money is not evil. Divinity doesn't always have to mean Christ like behavior. What it means is both are vehicles of a higher connection for yourself to experience. And if you look at them through the lens of how may I tap into great wealth and great divinity so I can be a point of light for others to then
There we
spark
go.
that connection in them. Now we begin to have this beautiful movement of really working towards something that will better mankind.
Absolutely. Could not
That's my
agree with you
thought
more
of
on
the day.
that. Coming back to what we were saying about, using spirituality and higher spiritual consciousness to support modern life as
Yeah,
opposed to overtaking it.
yeah,
It's exactly what you were just saying, finding those points of beauty, those points of spirituality in everything around us. And sticking with the issue around material things and materialism, etc. I often will say to my clients, when they say, "Oh, I want to earn more," for instance,
right,
but I'm worried that I'm going to be materialistic.
right,
And a couple of things come up out of just that statement that they'll make. The first is something that actually a deacon once told me, and he says, it's interesting. He just said it in passing. He goes, it's interesting to me that I find in my flock, in my congregation, the poor people are the ones who are actually materialistic. They're so heavily focused on material goods, keeping up with the Joneses, etc., that it overtakes their entire life. They have no space for God. Because the people who are not necessarily rich, but they're wealthy and they live within their means, right? They have a lot more space for the divine. They have a lot more time in their minds for certain things, etc. Now, again, not knocking one or the other,
right,
because he did also say quite clearly that materialism is a frame of mind. You can be a multimillionaire, but still incredibly focused on where your next dollar is coming from.
right,
But the same can be said for the person who's got $1 in their bank account. Equally, you can have someone who's a multimillionaire, and money just doesn't really interest them at all. Their interest is, how can I help uplift humanity, right? And they get handsomely rewarded for that.
right,
The other thing that really sticks out for me, and this is something that I actually said in passing, and I realized afterwards that, I should actually write that down because that's something I really want to meditate on for myself and hopefully share it with others too. And that was, wealth looks very different to different people.
yeah,
So for some people, $5,000 a month is wealth. That's being
right,
incredibly wealthy, right? I have enough money to put a roof over my head. I can travel, depending on where you live in the world, and the cost of living, of course. Um, I can travel. I can feed my family. I can still give back, and I've got time on my hands to visit friends, family,
right,
support the community, etc. For someone else, that number might be $50,000,
right,
right? And actually, when I was speaking to one client in particular, she goes, "Oh, I'm thinking I should really aim for $50,000 a month. I want to start a side hustle and I want to get it to that level." And I said, "Okay, let's run through this really quickly. What would you do with $50,000 a month?"
right,
She goes, "Oh, well, I do this, 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 this." So I said, "Okay, let's put my wealth manager cap on." I'm like, "Let's run these numbers real quick.
right,
So you want to pay off your debt? How much is it? It's this amount. Okay. And you want to put a down payment on a house? It's this amount. Okay, cool. And you wanted to do this, 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 this. All of this would be paid off in 18 months
right.
with
Then
that
what?
coming in. So
Right,
then what are you going to do with
yeah.
$50,000? Oh, I don't know. I said,
And
right now, yeah, sorry.
no, so yes, and this is making me think about true happiness, the true expression and experience of divinity. Because even if we poured all this money in wheelbarrows and dump trucks on your lawn, then what? After you run that list of what you think is going to connect you to a higher source, a higher power, better health, more happiness, more love, whatever it is, then what? That goes into another whole podcast.
Exactly. Now compare that with another client of mine who asked the same question, and she goes, 15. I need 15,000, or I want $15,000 a month. So that's an interesting number because normally people
Yeah.
round it up tens, 20s, etc.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? And she'd actually thought this through. And she said, well, 5,000 covers my expenses, allows me to go on holiday once every quarter with my husband, etc., etc., etc. And then 10,000 I would split, half would go into investments, and the other half I would continuously put into the there's a not a rec center, but essentially a
Like a
not-for-profit
youth
organization. Yeah, like a youth center kind of
a
a thing,
youth
yes.
center. Yeah.
And she's like, and that's the running costs for
Yeah.
that center. And I went, I have a weird feeling that you're going to get there very quickly.
Yeah.
She phoned me back 3 weeks later and she goes, I've done it. I've
Yeah.
got the amount of money. She says, what? You said I'm going to get there really quickly. How did you know? I said, because you knew what you wanted and you knew
Yeah.
what you were going to use it for. And it wasn't for self gain.
Right.
It was very much how can I give back to the community?
And she was aligned.
She
Her
was aligned,
thought
yes.
was aligned with purpose for herself first. She knew I have to take care of self, take care of my relationship, my love of travel, of good food, of feeling comfortable with a roof over my head. Okay, that's human condition that we need to address. Then she knew, now I want to give here. And that
Mm,
alignment, there was no limitation. You could feel even when you're talking with her, she knew this is what I want to do. I will create that pathway because there wasn't all these blocks. She didn't talk to you, well, I would like this amount of money because I really want to do this, but oh my God, this is very difficult. And all of that language. It was, this is what I need. This is why I need it. This is what I'd like to achieve. And I think again, this is maybe a bit of what the yogi was expressing in his book, not quite in this way, but alignment. When we are aligned without obstacle,
mm-hmm,
especially self-induced obstacles, universe in its divineness shows that reflection back out because it's energy is in everything. It sees thought in an energetic format and it wants to be expressed. And I know not all of us understand those quantum fields, but thought is energy, personality is energy, behavior is energy, interaction is energy. No
mm,
block to the energy. It flows and it really does. And we see this all the time. When we place blocks upon our thought process, we start to get a physiology reaction, right? I get
yes.
nervous, I get stressed, I get a headache, I get a backache, I bump my elbow, I stub my you can see how quickly this works. That's a beautiful example of maybe expressing to everyone that's listening. Take a moment and look at what you would like to create, what you would like to manifest, and how can you tap into your perception of divinity? What does that mean to you? And how can you begin to master and train that connection so that you understand what alignment feels like to you? And then understand you will have moments of contrast, but move through the contrast, which always brings us to the J3 equals E. So let's say you start to tap into that divinity, and then immediately you get that thought, well, I can't do that. No one's done that way. My family certainly has never done that. I don't quite live in a neighborhood where that's all again, all limiting. Now ask yourself, okay, I'm aware that I'm placing limitations on my alignment to divinity or to my creation of materialistic
Mm-hmm,
experiences, right? What am I willing to do? Change my thought, continue on my path. What am I aware of? I have blocks. That's it. They're just blocks. They're just thought
just blocks.
blocks. That's all they are. They're thought blocks. They are not mountains of cement that we're asking you to physically move. They're thoughts, right? Critical thinking. Let's just kind of soften the emotional resistance going into the behavior of how we've always behaved. Let's start thinking through critical thought. I can read, I can learn, I can study, I can listen, I can recalibrate, I can shift the way I've always thought into this new way of being, which will begin to create the momentum towards allowing more experiences around the attraction of materialistic things. And we're not talking about materialism again for self serving. We're talking about the sheer experience of the exchange of thought and manifestation through materialistic things, which is a beautiful expression of artistry, of divinity, and now energy. Just listen to something on biogeometry and the energy. Energy is in everything. The way
Yep.
you think, the way you observe, the way you perceive. Start to think with positive energy, and you will see the momentum shift. So, right there, in less than a minute, I ran through the J3 equals Z, and I already feel better about things.
That's the beautiful thing is actually I kind of feel like I just want to shut up for a minute and just bask in that actually, because it really is just recognizing, yeah, the divinity in everything, and it really is. It's everywhere, and it's interesting to me that in that book actually he brings out that his father's guru, the one who kind of brought him onto a more spiritual path, specifically was told that he had to live as a householder, as in still
Mm,
have a home, still have a wife, still have his kids, all of that stuff. He couldn't renounce everything. Um, and he had to live that way so that he could show people
yeah.
that you can have a beautiful home, you can have a family, you can have all of these worldly responsibilities around you and still experience union with the divine, still find beauty in all things.
That's like Jay Shetty, and we don't usually say, go outside too much to put
Yeah,
names into places, but I love his story. He was,
right.
at university, regular kid doing regular things, saw someone come in on campus, gave a talk, fell in love with the divinity of possibility of this pathway towards spiritualism, and the higher master said no,
Mm,
go back out into the world and show this. And he's a regular man on so many levels, but has this beautiful connection to spirituality, to consciousness awareness in his own way. So I think that's so important. You do not have to give up your religion, your spiritual connection, your soul's elevation
right.
for a beautiful life. You don't have to give up in order to have. You have to find the alignment to the truth of what matters for you. And when you are in that authenticity and aligned to that divinity, self divinity, and tapping into it, it'll all just unfold in its own
All
beauty.
comes together beautifully.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that we have this idea is because in a lot of texts they talk about, leaving things behind in order to follow an ascended master.
Yeah.
You've got to give up this, you got to give up that, you got to give up all kinds of things. But if you look at the deeper meaning, I mean, I'll take Jesus as an example. He says you have to give up fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers and wives and children in order to follow me, but you'll receive much more in the kingdom of God, right?
Right.
Now, Jesus was not saying that you need to disown your entire family. That would be
Right.
ridiculous. And we understand that, right? We get that.
Right.
What if you look at it in context though, what he was saying was you have to give up your way of looking at things.
Yes.
Because we tend to put the focus on the physical.
Yeah.
We put the focus on what's around us. So when he's talking about, mothers and fathers, etc., and riches and all the rest of it, what he's basically saying is you can still have those things
Right.
very easily. It shouldn't be your focus.
Right.
Instead, these things should just be like a beautiful way for you to go, oh, wow, look at how the universe has expressed itself today in the loving smile of a mother.
Yes, the simplicity. This is why we've talked about this within the Shift and Co. Don't overwhelm yourself. It's a walk. It's holding, a hand of your loved one. It's the simple movements. You don't have to go big, right? Or go home every moment of every day. This is taking a path that feels right for you
Mm,
and allowing yourself to engage in the human condition. And that means all of it. You can have a love of God. You can have a love of universal connection. You can have a love of self care. You can have a love of wealth building. It's okay. Yes, you can work an effort towards having it all, not at the expense of letting something go. This is why we have the word balance. This is why the energetic balance of walking a tightrope is so important. It can be done. Calm, right? Perseverance, thought into execution, and balance.
that's all. That's all, and that's it. This reading is so beautiful. It's
Oh,
usually a
love
mixed bag, but this is just so beautiful, and it's essentially a um, how to really find that spirituality. Because as I finished pulling the cards, I was just like, huh, there's an exercise that I was taught when I first got into esotericism around how to really awaken your spiritual gifts.
it.
And interestingly enough, the exercise is not what you would expect from esoteric teachings, right? You'd think it'd have ritual and meditation, and you got to do this breath work and sit in this yoga pose. And no, it was none of that. It was literally, and that's come out so strongly here, learn to find the joy and the beauty in everything. And
Mm,
the exercise goes as follows: twice a day for 10 days, you do the following exercises. It's two exercises. The one is where you look around you and you find things that are ugly. So you find like a cracked pavement, or I don't know, a blocked gutter, or just something around you in your environment that is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing, right?
right.
And then you actually stop to find the beauty in that.
Yeah.
So in the block gutter, the way the leaves are shaped can be beautiful, right?
Mm,
Do you need to clean that gutter up? Probably, but you can still find beauty in it,
yeah.
right? Find that beauty, find the appreciation for it. And then, in order to find your joy, list 5 things that you are grateful for. And again, they say not big things. So, what you never put on your list is I have a roof over my head or somewhere to sleep tonight.
Mm,
That's too big. You do things like I'm grateful for the way the sun is hitting that tree right now because it's beautiful. I'm grateful for the fact that my colleague just made me a cup of coffee and I was about to go make one, but actually I needed to finish this email.
mm,
I'm grateful for the fact that when I looked in the mirror this morning and I smiled at something silly, I was able to laugh at how ridiculous that was.
yeah. So
Finding the
important.
gratitude. Yeah.
Yeah, so important. Um, and it's funny as you say that because as I was saying, we haven't had sun. It's really been missing. I know she's been trying to come out, but and right now our summer is so beautiful, the green on the trees and the grass, and when the sun
Mm.
comes through and it's hitting all of like my neighbors' properties in such a way. And that's why a lot of times you'll see me, I'm always looking out my windows because it grounds me and it reminds me of the beauty and the divinity in the expression of all of us. And there's materialism, there's homes, and there's beautiful fences, and there's pools, and there's all kinds of things. And without that alignment in touching upon the divine, and touching upon the expression of thought into materialism, I would not have this to look at. And that's the beauty. So it's there and it's all around us.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Now I'm excited for our power quotes because,
Yes.
as our audience, well, by now should know, but for our new listeners,
Yes.
we always share a power quote after the reading. But it's so interesting because the reading is done live on the show, where the
Yeah.
power quote is picked just before,
Yeah,
and yet it always aligns perfectly with what we're
I
saying. So
know.
let's see.
And so what I tend to do is a moment before I just
Mhm.
tap into the divine and just say, what is a message for the betterment of those that are listening? I open the book and put it down. So I don't, you just saw me. I just picked it up
Yes,
for the first time. Sometimes I have two quotes. One could be on one page, two can be on. And wherever my eye goes, that's the one that I read. I don't even, so this one, and I love this. There is greatness hidden within the adventure of forward movement past the status quo. So I want you to think about everything we shared today.
venturing
There is
forward movement.
greatness. Greatness to me is divinity,
Yes,
manifestation, right? Beautiful, positive thinking, the execution, application of knowledge, all of that. Within the adventure of forward movement, move through the contrast, move through the old personality, right? Move through past the status quo. This brings this so beautifully together with advancement, expansion, past the present environment. It's on the first page of this, the Science of Empowerment. Regardless of your present condition, you can begin to advance in this moment. Use thought, use alignment, and tap into your own expression of that connection of divinity, of materialism. It is both in place for the beauty and the betterment of all of us.
fantastically said, as always. To our audience, thank you so much for joining both Laura and myself here today. Very excited, as always, to have been here with you. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Helps us with the algorithms and that on YouTube and on Facebook as well. So please
Yeah.
do share that with all your friends or your family. We really want to do as much as we can to uplift
Yeah.
humanity in general, actually.
And don't just listen and then click off. Like, we really do ask, because the more people that listen, they start to talk about something that they
Mhm.
heard within the podcast to a family member, to a coworker, to a friend, and then that person then brings that conversation out. And this is how we really do begin to change the distortion, to elevate one another in our own unique
Yes.
ways by sharing knowledge and shifting into a more positive mindset.
Absolutely. And if you're wanting a little bit of help on how to do that and how to shift into a more positive mindset, a more positive way of looking at things, a more positive life in general, the link to look at how to work with us is in the description as well.
Come be with
And
us.
indeed. And as you all saw right now, Laura's new book that she just held up is on
Yeah.
Amazon. The link to purchase that is in the description as well. And we absolutely look forward to hearing from you all very, very soon. Please do share your thoughts with us. As Laura says, we want to hear. We want to keep that conversation going as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Right. So
Bye.
everybody, have a wonderful day further, and we look forward to hearing from you all soon. Bye now.